If you think you can't bake, or you know you're afraid to bake, I'm going to show you a super easy, super delicious brownie recipe that anybody can do and that will impress everyone you give it to. It'll also impress you. Welcome to The Basic Baker. I'm Mike, I'm a home baker, and I want to demystify baking by demonstrating basic, accessible recipes, showing all the steps that the cooking shows leave out, and using basic kitchen tools that almost everyone has in their kitchen already. No fancy appliances needed. Welcome to my second episode. It's going to be the first where we actually bake something. The first episode, if you want to check it out, and I recommend you do, is an overview of the kinds of tools that you need, the way that you need to measure some baking ingredients, and how to make sure that your oven is doing exactly what it's supposed to. But today we are going to do my favorite brownie recipe. It's one of my standbys, and it's so easy, but it also tastes so good and so, I don't know, complex. Is that too foofy of a word? But it does taste complex, and everyone I give it to loves it. And if you're kind of new to baking, or you're trying to come back to baking and you've been discouraged in the past, I think this is going to be a great recipe to ease you back in. So let's begin. Now, in preparation for this episode, I decided I would bake a box mix, which I am constitutionally opposed to, but I just wanted to see how it tasted so many years after I used to bake these things and eat these things, and I was just wondering, how are my brownies going to measure up to grocery store box mixes? And I was actually kind of surprised. I thought it would be okay, but this anonymous box mix, who shall not be named, was absolutely quite disgusting. And I even gave my friends a couple of brownies and they agreed, so I know it's not just me. It tasted like a chemical plant. And that's not surprising because it's just a list of chemicals in the ingredients. So these are the box mix brownies that I made. I'm usually a little more careful with the things that I make, but I didn't need to be careful with this. This doesn't deserve respect. It deserves to go into the trash. And that's where I'm going to put it right now. Ugh. But it's not a big deal. It's not like I used any good ingredients. I used some bag of brown stuff and some oil and a couple eggs and some water, and that's it. No wonder they don't taste good. Chemicals plus all that stuff, you don't need it. So in this homemade recipe, we're going to use actual ingredients, and you're not going to have to use that many tools, and you're not going to have to do that much stuff. Although we are going to melt actual chocolate today, so don't be afraid of that. It's super easy. These are the basic kitchen tools you'll need to bake this recipe. A couple of bowls, a large and a medium, a dry measure of 1 cup, measuring spoons, a silicone spatula, good old wooden spoon, a square 8x8 brownie pan, and some parchment paper. Now you can use tin foil to line your pan and make like a sling, and it's actually great for cleanup, but I don't really like dealing with tin foil. It just kind of tears, and I don't know, I just don't like it. So I just put some parchment paper on the bottom, but you do what you want. Line it with tin foil. It'll actually be a lot easier cleanup than what I'm doing, so it's up to you. These are the ingredients that you'll need for this recipe. I've tried to present them as most people would have in their kitchen, not like on a fancy cooking show, except the cocoa powder I put in its own container because otherwise it's just super messy. And the salt I put in a container because when you're trying to measure salt into a measuring spoon from that round Morton's box and it just spills everywhere, it's a pain. So this is a lot easier for baking. But anyway, we will need flour, sugar, 2 kinds of chocolate, an ounce of, I'm using 60% dark chocolate here, and 5 ounces of semi-sweet. A little instant coffee, that's optional. You can also use really strong brewed coffee, but I find this easier and tastier. Some vanilla. We already went through the cocoa powder, and the salt, and a couple of eggs, and a stick of butter. And that's it. Super easy. Now I'm going to do the first thing that you should do when baking anything, and that's preheat your oven. I'm going to turn it on right now, and if you saw my first episode, you'll know that the oven isn't really preheated when it says it's preheated, so we want to give it plenty of time. Okay, now this recipe also calls for room temperature eggs, and you do usually want to put liquid ingredients like that at room temperature because you're baking something, you don't want to put something too cold in the mixture. I never really thought it was a big deal for a brownie recipe, but yeah, this recipe calls for room temperature eggs, so I'm going to show you how to get to room temperature from the fridge in like 5 minutes. So you just put them in a bowl of very warm, but not too warm, definitely not hot water. You don't want to hard boil it or really affect it other than to bring it up to room temperature. So in about 5 minutes, these eggs will be, good to go. Now the first thing we want to do is get our melted chocolate going, and it really couldn't be easier. When I first started, I was like, oh, I'm going to do the double boiler on the stove. That's how they do it on TV. It's a huge mess, and it's a pain, and you can really overheat your chocolate, and it's just not worth it. So I put it in the microwave, and if you don't know how to use the power settings on your microwave, definitely learn. Look them up if you have to. Go on Google, whatever, but it makes things so much easier, and you just nuke them at, well, you don't really nuke. You warm it gently for about a minute at a time at very low temperature, and you just keep on doing it until it's almost done. So I'm going to start doing that now. So you may remember that the recipe called for ounces of chocolate, not cups or spoonfuls or anything that you can put into a measure. And that's how chocolate usually comes. It's maybe not so easy to measure with chocolate chips, but if you get bar chocolate, it's super easy. Like for this 60% chocolate, it was a box of 4 ounces. It came in 8 squares. So obviously 2 squares is 1 ounce. That's really easy. And same with the semi-sweet chocolate. Each of these little squares is a 1/4 ounce. It even says so on here. It makes it really easy. So I want to say a word about the chocolate for this recipe. I highly recommend using some darker, higher quality chocolate for it. I don't know how milk chocolate would taste in this. I've never tried making it with milk chocolate, but milk chocolate, as the name implies, has more milk than chocolate, and the darker you go when you see percentages, that means that's percentages of chocolate. I've tried making this with various mixtures. I went up to 70% once, but that was too dark, and I've tried doing different ratios. I've tried 4 ounces of semi-sweet and 2 ounces of darker chocolate, and that also was no good. So this is the ratio that works for me, but hey, play around at home, do what you want. But with this chocolate, yeah, I would go to the baking section of the grocery store to buy your chocolate, not the candy aisle, unless you know that it's going to be like high quality chocolate that you're getting. So you want to get your chocolate in as small pieces as you can. If you don't have a sharp knife, then certainly break it up with your hands, but it's definitely better to have smaller pieces when you can. Actually, I don't even usually do this when I make this recipe because I have like a bag of really nice chocolate chips, and I just use the scale to measure it out. But this is the basic baker. We're using basic tools, nothing fancy, so we're gonna let the boxes tell us how much there is. And make sure you're using, if you are gonna use a kitchen knife, make sure you are using a nice sharp knife. As they say, there's nothing more dangerous in the kitchen than a dull knife. So let's put that in there. Oh, I don't want that. Okay, so just continue chopping these up. Okay, do that. We'll get all these little crumbs later. And these are, really easy. You can just break them up with your hands. Oh, I don't know if you heard that. That was the preheat indicator on the oven. I did put an oven thermometer in there just to show you that my oven really is not preheated to 350, and your oven probably is also not preheated to the temperature that it's supposed to be when your preheat indicator goes off. So let's check out that temperature now. Yep, 275, not 350. If we were already done our recipe and put it in right when the preheat indicator went off, we'd have a disaster. So usually it does come up to temperature after about 10 minutes after the indicator, so I'll check then. Okay, so we got our chocolate in there, and let's see. We don't want to lose a bit of this, do we? Now, we also have to put in 8 tablespoons of butter. How do you know it's 8 tablespoons? It's right there on the stick. So it's super easy. You don't have to use any spoons or measuring cups or anything. So 8 tablespoons is 1 stick of butter. We're also going to make sure that this butter is in small pieces so that it melts faster. I usually just, okay, well, this has been out for about, it's been out for a bit, so it's a little melty. Just cut it into squares. Gross. Okay. So we'll just put that in there. And just remember to separate out those little squares if we can. And there we go. Okay. Now just mix them up a little bit. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Now, stick this in the microwave. I usually start at like 4 or 3 for about a minute. Power level, let's say 4. So while the chocolate is melting, we can put together our other ingredients. We're going to start with a cup of sugar. If you did see the first video where I was talking about measuring dry ingredients, sugar really isn't a big deal. Flour is the one that's compressible that you have to be a little careful with, but sugar you can just scoop right out of the bag. So we need a cup of that. All right, this bag was not big enough to scoop in, but all right. But we'll level it off. That should be plenty. Okay. All right. There you go. Cup of sugar. Okay. All right, let's see how we're doing now. Okay, we're melted a little bit. So we'll just mix that up a little bit, make sure, oh, that's nice. That butter and chocolate is melting together very nicely. I think I'm just gonna do maybe another 30 seconds, if that, maybe even at a lower temperature. I don't want to melt this chocolate completely in the microwave because we run the risk of overheating it. And besides, when we do the last little bit ourselves, that also helps cool down the chocolate mixture so that we can combine it with the other ingredients. I'm just gonna put this in for a little bit longer. That's about perfect. It's almost done, but not quite. So just stirring it a little bit with your silicone spatula for a few seconds. That's going to help melt the rest of those not quite melted little lumps of chocolate, and it'll be perfect. You won't have overheated anything, and the mixture will be just that much cooler so that when you put it in with all the other ingredients, including the eggs, it's not going to be too hot. Oh, there's the timer. 10 minutes after the preheat indicator went off. Let's see what the temperature is now. Okay, there we go. It's just about at 350, which is what it's supposed to be. And I usually do give it about 15 minutes after the preheat indicator goes off. So, if it's at, 346, 347, maybe it'll come up a couple degrees, maybe not, it'll be fine. So, okay, 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder. And just level that off like this. Make sure no little divots in here. Maximize our chocolate. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay, there we go. Teaspoon of vanilla extract. So we'll put that in. Oh, all right, maybe I over poured a little bit, but a little extra vanilla never hurt anybody. Okay, instant coffee, half a teaspoon. You can also use a teaspoon of liquid, brewed coffee, pretty strong, but I think I actually just get a better flavor with the instant. So, okay, half a teaspoon. Okay. Salt, a 1/4 teaspoon. This recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon plus 1/8 teaspoon of salt. So, this set does include a 1/8 measure. Most measuring spoon sets don't. So, you can just approximate by filling up your 1/4 teaspoon measure halfway. Where's my salt? Here we go. Isn't this easier than pouring it out of the can? I think so. All right. All right, and I'm gonna put, no, I'll approximate, here we go, 1/4. Oh, there we go, okay. Oh, these eggs are nice, ooh, room temperature. There we go. I've been trying to do the whole one-handed break the eggs thing too. Doesn't always work, but at least this way it'll be easy to see if any shells get in. Ooh. Oh, God. All right, I'll break it in there. See, a shell did get in. Okay. Some people will actually break individual eggs in a little bowl before adding it to the main mixture, just to make sure that nothing's wrong with it, that a piece of shell didn't get in, or that the egg isn't bad or whatever. So there we go. I've paid for my sin of pride. Okay, now we have all the other ingredients in there. This is a great thing to whip up on a whim if you have the ingredients there. I tend to always have chocolate in the house. And there we go. So that's pretty much combined. Don't want to overmix it. Generally, you don't want to overmix anything. All right, add the cooled chocolate. See, this is one of the great things of having a silicone spatula, because we'll be able to scrape every bit of this chocolate out of the bowl. So here we go. Yep, literally as much as I can get. These are chocolate brownies after all. Now, mix this again. Again, do not overmix, just combine it till it's uniform. Looks pretty uniform to me. Okay. Okay, now to the fun part, the part that everybody dreads, measuring out the flour. But if you've seen the first video, you'll know it's super easy as long as you do it the right way. So I'm going to first take my fork. We want to do the fluff, spoon, and level method. So we want to make sure that this flour is aerated, nice and fluffy. It's not really clumped together at all, because that's how you end up putting in more flour than you actually intend to. So we'll just take this fork, just make sure that this is nice and fluffy. It looks nice and fluffy. I hope the camera can see that. But I think I'll just gently spoon out this flour. Gently, we don't want to compress anything either in the bag or in the measure. Oh, that's nice. Okay, just maybe a little bit more. So, okay. And, all right, so we'll just level that out. Okay. There we go. Now we can just add the flour in. That's it. That's our last ingredient. Look at how good that looks. And now we put it into our 8x8 pan, which I completely forgot to grease and paper. That's really the second thing you should do after you turn on the oven, but I didn't do it. Oh, let's see. So I usually use butter. I don't use the spray. I mean, there's butter in here. You know, might as well use ingredients that are already in there. Besides, it tastes better. And here. So I just kind of take a little bit of butter and grease it like that. All right, now the parchment paper. Generally just have to cut it to size. I just take the knife and, you know, do this. I don't think it's particularly good for the knife, but I don't do it that often, and it's easy. And, you know, whoever got hurt by taking the easy way out. So, again, this is a great time to have a silicone spatula to just scrape every bit as you can out of the bowl. Batter is really thick. It's very viscous, so you just kind of have to push it around to make sure that it's all evenly covering the pan. And include the corners. All right. Okay, well, that's pretty much it. Now we put it in for, well, for me, about 20 to 25 minutes, and I will start checking around, probably around 18 or 19 minutes, because there's the dog, but you don't want to check it too late. It's better to check it early than too late. The timer just went off at 18 minutes. Let's see. Ooh, that looks really good. So you can't really go by cooking times in the recipe. You just have to go by what things look like. So for brownies, it's usually, I don't know if you can tell when it starts to pull away from the pan, and also when you put a toothpick in the middle, you want it to come up just with a few crumbs. If it comes out clean, you've overbaked it, because you want those brownies moist. I'm sorry, you want them moist. So that's a little dirty. It's got a few crumbs. I'm gonna take it out now. Okay. Oops, all right. I accidentally put a little divot in there. Okay. We now have to let this cool for 2 hours until it's completely cool. Just consider it, these brownies are lava until they're completely cooled. And it'll be worth it. So we'll see in a couple hours. Okay, it's been a little under 2 hours and the brownies are nice and cool. So it's time to cut them and then eat them. So first thing to do is get your brownies out of the pan. So I did butter up the pan pretty well, and there's parchment paper on the bottom, but you still gotta run a knife around the edges carefully. All right, now let's see what happens. There we go. All right, we'll put this over here. Peel off that parchment paper. So now I can use my ruler and cut everything into equal pieces. You're probably looking at me like I'm crazy right now, but what if you have kids and you're giving them brownies, and one kid gets a brownie that's one molecule bigger than the other kid's brownie? It's going to be World War III. So, consider this. Don't consider this a sign of obsession. It's an instrument of world peace. At least if you have kids. For me, it's just a sign of obsession. But I know the interior of my pan is 7.5 inches, so I used to cut them in 4x4, but these are so dense and rich that I cut them 5x5 now. So that means 1 every 1.5 inches will get me 5x5. So here we go. I'm just gonna make a little mark. You can cut your brownies any way you want, and you've probably noticed that these are upside down. I like how it looks when I cut them upside down instead of from right side up, because right side up, your knife ends up dragging through and then dragging a lot of brownie innards all over the tops, and I think it looks neater this way. Who's obsessed? So, if you got, silverware knife, kitchen knife, do whatever you want. I have a pizza cutter and this works great. So, so here we go. And also the ruler helps make sure that it's absolutely straight. And I start the pizza cutter in the middle instead of at the edges because the edges are a little crunchy, so it's neater to do it from the middle outward. So, okay. God help me, one of these days I'm going to get a T-square when I do this. All right. Okay. Well, look at that. That looks pretty even, doesn't it? All right. Uh-oh. Here we go. Okay. So now I want to get them right side up. And I'm just going to do it this way. Easy. Look at that. Look at that. Beautiful. All right. Okay, now's the moment of truth. This is the moment that my life for the last 4 hours has been leading up to, and I can't wait to taste this brownie. It looks so good, so moist. Sorry, it does look moist, okay. All right, here we go. Oh man, that is so good. I don't even know how to describe it. It's the complete opposite of the box mix. It has depth, it is dark, but it's sweet and light. I don't know how to describe it, but the mixture of the dark and the semi-sweet chocolate, I think that's key to the whole recipe. And oh, dog. You know, the dog's not getting any of this. But I don't know, I've loved these brownies for years, and that little bit of coffee taste comes through, not overpowering. You can tell it's there, but it's just in the background, and I don't know how to describe it. You know, I've only been making these videos for, I guess, a couple weeks, so I'm more used to eating food than describing it, but this is just so good. Box mix got nothing on this. So, if you bake this and you like it, tell me in the comments. I'm really interested to know. But, oh my God, you know, this is great with coffee too. You know, and since it's great with coffee, then that must mean it's good for breakfast. Not that I've ever had brownies for breakfast before. Oh no. Well, I hope this has given you some inspiration to start baking or to take up baking again. I hope you agree that this recipe looked pretty easy, and the results that you get are so much more than the effort that you put into it. Anyway, please try it. I'd love to see how it turns out. Oh, yeah, like and subscribe. All that. I hope you'll join me for the next episode. All right. Thanks.